Welcome, Don.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Dr. Neva. I am very much honored to be on this panel with such distinguished people who are talking about such important stuff. This period that we're going through, during this pandemic is a very unique thing in human history, and definitely in modern history. What we are experiencing is something that we simply haven't experienced before, and we've had to make adjustments. Sometimes when we look at what's happening, we ask ourselves, does anyone really know the answers of what should be happening? But we are all trying to adjust. And I would like to say that, first, what my mission is as a mental health counselor and a director of a large mental health practice here in Valley Stream. We're serving people from Long Island to Queens to upstate New York, the 5 boroughs, and a lot of our clients are children. And our mission is really to help all of the people that we can. And one thing that I can say is that children are those that are, it's the most challenging, especially the younger the child. It's more challenging to help children through online mental health sessions. So the sessions that we do with younger children, especially children under 10, are often 30-minute sessions because children sometimes don't have the vocabulary to really talk and process issues in the same way that high-functioning adults do. And, so what I would say is that children, products of their lifespan. So if you think about a 10-year-old child, that child has been alive for 10 years. So a school year is a pretty good percentage, maybe 8% of that child's life experience. And even cognitively, it may be less of a percentage than that, or more of a percentage than that, because the child may not have, had the kind of cognition that we can think of a child thinking and learning until they were, maybe 3 years old. So this is a completely new experience. Social interaction is important because social interaction reduces stress, and this is across the line of ages, through children and adults. Social interaction reduces stress, it combats depression, and enhances intellectual stimulation. Children who are not in school are immediately dealing with that challenge, that they are not being stimulated in the same way that they would have been. The social brain, in quotes, is known as the orbital prefrontal cortex. That is part of the frontal lobe of the brain. And typically, when we talk about the frontal lobe of the brain, we're talking about that important executive functioning that was spoken of. We're also talking about social skills and social development. So when you hear about social and emotional learning, what you're really talking about is the development of a child in the way that is not simply cognitive, is not rote learning or even skill learning. It's social and emotional skill building, so that the child will learn cues of how to interact with their peers, how to interact with adults appropriately, what's known as code switching, that there may be ways that you can act amongst your friends that you can't act in school. And this goes, children really are learning this from very young. And sometimes you can see the difference within our children in terms of how they behave in front of different people, how much they have learned that code switching, that I'm talking about. So one of the things that I think is very important to do as an intervention to the fact that children are existing in this environment where they had to switch from one way of being, one way of learning, what they've known, to online learning, is making sure that children have some social experiences. And, in a time like December of 2021, just, a little over a month ago, the Omicron variant was at its highest numbers, especially in New York. And so we really, in many cases, had to totally shut down what our children were doing in terms of social interaction, but as much as possible, even if it's in very small groups, we need to expose our children to interacting either within the family unit or hopefully with peers outside of the family unit in some kind of healthy situation where they get to have a social exchange with other children. Additionally, we really need to, there was a lot of talk about supporting kids and really listening to kids. And, the question of, does talking out a situation help it out? Yes, it does. It turns out that it definitively does help, just for kids to be validated, for them to be heard. And when you say back to a child what you hear them saying, and you actually understand what they're experiencing from their point of view, it does help the child process it. And when I say the child, I'm talking about all the way from age 4 to, teenagers, 16, 17, 18-year-olds need to be validated during this tough period. There's some research that even suggests that when a child is having a tantrum, a lady just a little while ago was talking about her daughter being defiant, that when you say back to the child what they are saying with some emotion, some of the emotion that the child reflected when they said it, that it actually helps the child to calm down. Because, telling a child to calm down or to relax or not to, essentially not to feel or express whatever they are expressing, can actually be emotionally damaging in some cases. And so, validating our children is very important. As far as these social skills are concerned, of course, humans range from, loner to life of the party, and the disruption of the social development that is to take place naturally can have untold effects. We talk about often what's happening with learning loss, and the popular phrase is unfinished learning, that possibly children are growing up at a time where you may be able to count maybe 10 years from now, what the effects will be of this learning loss or unfinished learning. And so in some cases, there's been studies saying that, there may be $150,000 of earning lost over the period of a lifetime because of what's happening just in these 2 years that we've experienced. Some of the other statistics that I think have been very interesting has been that there's an estimate that between 5 and 8% of children are experiencing what is known as mental health symptoms. So you're seeing children having more signs of anxiety, more irritability, children having, some kind of depressive symptoms. But, truly, those statistics are really hard to capture, partially because, mental health diagnosis is really something that has very specific scientific criteria. So for instance, to diagnose depression, over a 6-month period, repetitious behaviors, symptoms have to take place, which is, why when there's really distinctive characteristics or things taking place that may indicate a mental health issue, it really means that you need to have that child see someone. Because if the child is seeing someone, then that can be measured more carefully than a parent just watching the child. So the estimate of parents in those same statistics is that parents estimate a 35% jump in what they see as changes in their child that might be a result of some kind of mental health issue. So that's a big difference between 5 to 8% estimate and a 35% estimate by parents. And the reason for that is because it's really hard to measure these things objectively. But if parents are seeing major differences in their children in terms of that irritability that I spoke of, or withdrawal, just not wanting to participate, or other symptoms that may be depressive, it is definitely necessary, I think, to make sure that your child gets the help that they can receive, because it does not have to be at the level of a mental health, quote unquote, illness for that child to receive help. I would like to finish by saying that mental health intervention is low stakes, meaning that if you want to get help from a professional counselor, a therapist, a social worker, this help is something that you can get without any consequence to your child. Your child can receive the help confidentially, and it doesn't do anything to cause some kind of stigma on the child. I think, maybe 30 years ago, there was a lot more stigma associated with mental health intervention. Now, when people receive assistance from children all the way up to adults, people can be assured it is low stakes because it's confidential. And I'll just add this: our most used diagnosis is adjustment disorder, not otherwise specified. And that basically means that a person, child or adult, is experiencing problems adjusting to a situation, which can be any situation, which doesn't mean the person is mentally ill, but it means that the person is simply having a problem adjusting to a life situation that has presented itself. And I think we can all agree that this life that we've all lived during the pandemic is a social, emotional situation like none other. And so, children, I think, experience this more than anyone, so I hope that information is helpful to you, and I'm definitely open for questions.
Thank you so much. I think you have a lot of great information, stats. I was making notes, but then you answered some of my questions while I was making notes. But there are comments as well. And I'm going to actually open it up to others before I, give my ask the question. So here, let me just go back. Parents, okay, all right. So Ordell was saying, parents, please ask your school what they are doing to support SEL, social emotional learning for your child. Parents, please ask that. Why do you think it's important that they ask that, Ordell? What's the reason behind it?
Well, Don had mentioned, part of his presentation, he was talking about that social emotional learning and how beneficial it is, not only for, the academics for our students, but our students can't learn unless their social emotional well-being is being met. So I know in our district, we implemented a K-5 social emotional learning program within our schools. So all of our elementary schools are using the same program, and it goes over, mindfulness and being kind and, all those things you would think about social and emotional. So schools are mandated in New York to have some type of social emotional learning program within their schools. So asking your school district, what do they do, is an important question, because they should be doing something.
Great, thank you so much. Awesome. Okay, so Lorraine, you want to ask, you made a comment. I think you could speak it up, say it. I think it'll be a little bit more understanding and context to it. Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm a little slow to getting the mute off. So yes, so my daughter's in 9th grade right now, but I'm just saying that in middle school, there was actually a waiting list to get her help. I wanted her to speak to like a counselor, and there's psychologists and psychologists. There's all types of help in a school, at least in New York in our school system, but there was actually a waiting list. And then the pandemic hit, and then it made it even worse, because it's Family Services of Westchester that works in our area, and they have offices, but I couldn't get my daughter to an office. There's nothing wrong with her. She doesn't need anything, and all those kind of things. So for middle, when she was in middle school, there was just a waiting list. And then by the time she cleared the waiting list and we got an appointment, pandemic hit. So it was all about timing for me. So it was really bad timing in that sense. But, I completely agree with the point of adjusting. I was just noting that my daughter always had difficulties from a very, very young age. I noticed it in elementary school that she could never move from a Sunday to a Monday. She just couldn't adjust. And it was, emotional attachment. It was everything from a very young age. Even in preschool, I saw it. So being aware of all these things definitely helped me. But unfortunately, even though I was so aware, it didn't really help me that much because I didn't get the help I needed. But I like that there's that New York, they have to have an SEL program, you're saying. I think, so I like to hear that, because that's something, even though I'm homeschooling, like I say, I'm also substitute teaching in the school system. So it's good to know, because I'm probably going to be a teaching assistant next year. And it's just, it's something that's always good to know.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So Thank you.
Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, it's one of the things that can be unfortunate is that sometimes the social emotional learning component that it does exist in schools, putting out fires or big things happen in schools, safety issues and other things happen that end up sucking up the resources of the social emotional learning piece. And, the the child that does well, or the children that, are not necessarily struggling and can be identified as struggling, sometimes don't get the benefit of the social emotional learning programs. I mean, obviously the best programs that exist in school really create opportunities for a wide swath of kids to get some kind of programming where they may benefit from group, or talking with other kids, or talking with other kids with the advisement of an adult who's a school psychologist or social worker that, can help them get through what is a difficult time in life, whether there's a pandemic or not. And I'll just add this. Many of the doctors that have given us clients over the years, like I'm talking about medical directors and other doctors in the community who pass out our literature to their own patients so that patients can get help when they see depression in the doctor's office, etc. Many of these doctors ended up becoming our patients during the pandemic because they were seeing so much death and illness in the hospital that led to family tragedy, just the anxiety of, the spread of COVID, etc. All of these things were causing everyone a great deal of anguish. So we saw a doubling of requests for sessions from 2020 to 2021.
I'm glad they got help, but at the same time, it's just sad to hear that the very same doctors that are supposed to be helping us is actually, but they got help, and that's important. So Don, let me ask you, with students that are not doing well online, do you recommend what can motivate them? Is there any recommendations there? Those are like, oh, this doesn't feel right. I'm not doing it,
Yeah, I think that my biggest recommendation is for parents to keep that open and positive relationship with your child so you can keep talking with them. If there's an aunt or a cousin or other people in the family that you can get them together with so that you're keeping that social interaction happening. I think that is a great part of it. Many children, and I'm using children loosely because I'm really talking also about the 16, 17-year-olds, they did not do badly necessarily with online learning. They adjusted, but it does not mean that they are okay without their school experience. And so I personally was very relieved that school was back in effect this year, even though the Omicron variant came along and put a scaring on everybody. And actually, many people I know with children got COVID, children included, but it's, in my mind, it's that important that children receive that in-person experience as much as possible, so I guess just the answer to your question is just us supplementing the ongoing conversation, getting them the counseling if necessary, and getting them the and just improving our own relationships with our children. I'll say this last thing, and that is that kids can also, sometimes the places locally in New York are really overwhelmed, including our agency. We have a little wait in order to get an intake, and then a little wait to see a counselor. So, it can be frustrating for people. The emails and calls we get are like, I need help now. I really need something for my daughter right away. And we can only do the best we can. And, there's There's the possibility that you could, go across state lines in the sense that if you're using your insurance, you really have to use a New York professional to see your child, your Blue Cross Blue Shield or your United Healthcare. That person needs to be in New York. In some cases, there's professionals in other states that can help, but they actually can't call it counseling. If it's across state lines, they have to call it coaching or something else. But there's some of the options that people are using. But generally, people can go on a psychologytoday.com or just Google what is local in your community. And there's usually a wait, especially now, but you can still get the assistance.
All right, thank you.